Millions of Americans are feeling the impacts of extreme heat waves, which are growing in intensity, frequency, and duration due to climate change. In today's Facts Are Facts, we're breaking down how deadly rising temps can be. Now, here's the latest on what we know. So far, there have been 45 heat-related deaths in the U.S. this year. That includes 20 in Arizona, where the city of Phoenix has now experienced 24 consecutive days with highs exceeding 110 degrees. 14 in Texas, 7 deaths in Nevada, and 2 in California. Meanwhile, both Maryland and Louisiana have reported 1 heat-related death each. Now, to share more insight on this new normal, we'd like to bring in the author of the book, The Heat Will Kill You First, Life and Death on a Scorched Planet, journalist Jeff Goodell. Jeff, thanks so much for joining us. Now, Jeff, you've been covering climate and environmental issues for a large part of your career. Why are you turning your focus now on heat?
Well, I turned my focus on heat because heat is the, number one killer of the climate impacts. It's the one thing that is most dangerous to us as human beings. And it is the one aspect of climate change that I think is most misunderstood. We don't understand very well the risks of these extreme heat events, and we don't understand very well how to handle them and what to do.
Yeah, when we take a look at, weather-related deaths every year, heats, obviously, that's the big one, like you mentioned. Do you think one of the reasons why it doesn't get I don't know if publicity is the right word or awareness is the right word, but it doesn't get that attention because of the unknowns, or is there something else you think as to why?
Well, I think there's a number of factors. One is that people like warm weather. So the idea of warmth is sort of something that we're conditioned to kind of like. And, it's even, in our language, when we talk about climate change, we talk about global warming, which sounds like this sort of gentle, far off thing that's happening somewhere in the future to people that we'll never see or have anything to do with. So I think that we're not prepared for it in that sense. Plus, compared to like a hurricane, right, which is very visual. You see roofs being blown off houses. It's very clear that the risks there. When you look out the window, I'm here in Austin, Texas. I'm looking out the window. I can't tell if it's 90 degrees or 120 degrees out the window. It's invisible. So it's very difficult for us in the media to communicate the risk.
So, Jeff, on that note, what do you think we can do or need to do to raise awareness of this?
Well, the first thing we need to do is people need to get educated about the risks of heat, whether it's, reading my book or others or whatever your method is. We need to do a better job of educating ourselves about it. We need to do a better job of mobilizing public health officials and city officials, the way that we do with hurricanes and other storms, rating heat waves. In some cities are even working on naming heat waves, trying to give them a way to increase public awareness. And then, a lot of the heat problems is in cities. So we need to democratize access to air conditioning, make it easier and cheaper for people to get air conditioning, change shade structures in cities. There's a lot of interest in whitening cities, to reflect away some of the heat, whether it's painting streets white or white roofs, things like that.
Yeah, we've talked a lot about that stuff on our show. And you're right. I mean, there isn't as clear of a way to kind of describe. I remember us talking about, was it Death Valley last summer? They hit like 130 something. It was like the warmest that they've had. And it's hard to see it other than looking at the thermometer. Right. But you have some interesting messaging in your book comparing our heat into an analogy as to a nuclear bomb. Can you break that down for us?
Well, the amount of heat that is being absorbed by the oceans every day is, equivalent to the heat from thousands of nuclear bombs. And it's difficult to grasp this because it's, heat is this invisible thing. And most people, including myself before I wrote this book, don't even know what heat is. We know what temperature is, but heat itself is a very difficult thing to even describe. Heat is really the vibration of molecules is all it really comes down to. But it's, the very physics itself is very difficult to communicate.
So, Jeff, this is your wheelhouse. You didn't just kind of decide, I'm going to start talking about heat in forms of climate change. What are some of the changes that you've noticed as you've been covering a changing climate over the years?
Well, one of the big changes is, first of all, is, a decade ago, whenever we talked about climate change, it was always, moving to solar or renewable energy was too expensive and required subsidies and all that. And now the economic arguments are out the window. Renewable energy is cheaper virtually in every part of the world. That's one big change. The other big change is that, unfortunately, climate change has become this partisan issue. It's become stuck in the kind of culture wars that is engulfing our country right now, and the whole question of the authority of science and the accuracy and trust in scientists has been undermined. And to me, that's very dangerous, because this is basically a story of physics. This is a story of science. This is a story of not a political event. This is this is physics that we're talking about here.
Can you kind of break down? I know we talk a lot. We have a lot of headlines coming out of Arizona, the Southwest, and even you guys in Texas. You've been breaking records left and right, and there's only a few places to go to really, cool down, other than these cooling shelters opening up. I don't know how long you've lived there or been there, but have you noticed any changes within that city itself or Texas in general because of the heat?
No, I mean, we need more public green spaces. We need, here in Austin, there's a public pool called Barton Springs that, it has become a very popular gathering point, for people in Austin. In the evening, it's really crowded. You can even almost hear the sizzle of the hot bodies jumping in the cool waters in the evening here. But, these kind of changes happen slowly to the infrastructure of our world. I mean, they're trying innovative things like making buses free on hot days when the temperature gets at a certain degree. So people who don't have access to air conditioning can jump on a bus and just ride it around and cool off. So there are things like that can be done. But these changes are going to take time, and they're not happening fast enough.
Yeah. So Jeff, quickly, I know we've talked a lot about the heat and we're focusing on your latest book, but what are some of the topics that you covered in your previous books?
Well, my previous book was about sea level rise and the impacts of sea level rise, which are very different than the impacts of heat, right? I mean, nobody stands on the beach in Miami Beach and drowns because Antarctica decided to melt that day. So it's not really a human risk; it's a risk to economics and real estate, and brings up a lot of complicated issues about relocating and how we build and where we build. Mm-hmm. But it's very different risk than heat risk, which is one of the reasons why I was so attracted to this book, is because this is really about, how these changes in weather can kill you. And, the title of my book is kind of deliberately provocative in that way, because I wanted to make climate change an intimate issue, something that impacts all of our lives in a very personal way.
Well, we appreciate your time. Thank you so much. That's journalist Jeff Goodell, author of the book. Again, the title, since you were just talking about that, The Heat Will Kill You First, Life and Death on a Scorched Planet. That was an interesting conversation when you talk about the headlines that we've had. Think about how long it takes to write a book, and then it's happening to get released, or
right.
We were talking about it when all these headlines are coming out right now.
Right, and now we're seeing it currently. I think that the recent amount of heat that we've seen has been really eye-opening to a lot of people.
I think it has too.